let's talk about major gift fundraising for a second. So I just recently read this incredible white paper. I think Amy Eisenstein was one of the authors. I'm not sure how new it is. It said that only 22% of nonprofits had a major gift strategy.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Why is that?
We're here with our weekly LinkedIn Live. How should modern executive directors think about blank? ... Question mark. A different topic every week. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Proimpact Project, a brand new nonprofit organization, the mission is to try to support the evolution and modernization of the nonprofit sector. We're trying to offer a bunch of free resources and content and community for modern executive directors. The stuff that I looked around for over and over again during my 9 years as an ED of the organization CoachArt and couldn't find. So check out proimpact.org. We've got an upcoming free online conference for nonprofit EDs called the ED Summit in October. We've got the ED Hive, monthly Hive based on the nonprofit Hive model. We've got a blog post and this series. And so I'm incredibly excited today. We've got Major Gifts guru, Rhea Wong. I'm a huge fan of her content and how she talks about and thinks about the evolution of major gifts. And she was a former ED herself. She is now the founder of the Rhea Wong Consulting consultancy, the host of the Nonprofit Lowdown podcast, an awesome podcast, and the author of Get That Money, Honey. So excited to welcome to our weekly LinkedIn Live series, Rhea Wong.
Having me.
Yeah.
Such a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. So I had read that when you first became an ED, you did a Google search of how should you actually do this job? What does an ED do? And how do you fundraise? And that's kind of the thing that we're trying to solve, is like that there's not enough content and resources for EDs. And then I heard your podcast episode last year, things that you wish that you had known as an ED. Mm-hmm. So much of it was about mindset, which I really loved. What do you think a modern ED, just before we even jump into major gifts, what are some of your thoughts about how the mindsets are shifting for modern EDs?
Well, Greg, it's such a big question. So I was an ED back. I started in 2005. And I think that, well, first of all, there are way more resources in the world now than there was back in 2005. But the downside is that there are way more resources. And so I think often we can get lost in the noise of like, well, maybe I should try this, or maybe I should try this. And now there's AI, and it can be very confusing. Or what new CRM system should I try? So that can all be very confusing. The other thing is, I will say that the online marketing space has really changed quite dramatically in the last 20 years, right? So what worked back in 2005 is certainly not going to work today. And unfortunately, and I think this speaks to the work that you're doing, as a sector, we're pretty slow to adopt new technologies and new strategies. And so really, a big driver for me is to share these new techniques and these new tools and this ever evolving landscape with my nonprofit folks, because often, I felt like I was 5 years, call it maybe even 10 years behind the for-profit sector. And I'm not saying that the for-profit is always better, but I do think that there's more of a willingness to adopt new tools and new technology faster. So that being said, I do think with all the tools, tactics, strategies, AI, et cetera, that you can use, the big game changer for me was mindset. And so up to about $1 million, I was like grinding and hustling my way through. The difference between $1 million and $3 million was not really anything that I did differently. It's that I showed up differently. Like I had changed my energy around fundraising. And I say this a lot to folks who have listened to my content. It's a little bit like dating. When you're kind of in a desperate mode and you're trying to get a date, like things don't really work out. I think people can kind of smell the desperation. And this happened to me. The minute I got a boyfriend, all of a sudden everyone wanted my number. Why is that? Because my energy had changed. My perspective had changed. I showed up differently, and I think people really respond to that. So I know it sounds very woo-woo, sounds very intangible, like, well, how do I change my energy? So a big component of my teaching is really around um, unpacking a lot of the money stuff and money trauma that a lot of us carry. And we carry that into the work. And if we're not careful about unpacking all that stuff, it affects our outcomes and results.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. And one of the things I was just thinking about when you said the phrase "in nonprofit we're always 5 to 10 years behind in technology," I think there's like a similar mindset shift that we can do internally as a sector and try to promote externally to the public. That's sort of like, well, why? And can we just change that? That there's nothing that when you get official nonprofit status that says, okay, and by the way, please wait 5 to 10 years before adopting any AI best practices, et cetera. And so what does it look like to just try to, get rid of that stereotype and adopt a new mindset that, sure, we're going to stay, lead the charge on some of these things.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I have to say, Greg, that I think part of it is not our fault, right? Because historically, before the boom of AI, we did get worse technology. We'd have to wait for someone to develop a CRM system that was conducive to the work that we had to do. Like, I remember being on TechSoup and being like, cool, I'm on this list to get 5-year-old computers. Like, why?
mhm,
Why are we making do with less than our for-profit counterparts? However, I think we're in a golden age of AI right now, which is a great equalizer, I would say. And so I really want to encourage people to lean into, even if you're AI curious, because the number one thing I hear from everybody is like, there's too much work to do and I don't have enough staff to do it.
mhm,
AI is the thing that helps you to leverage the existing staff that you have. Now, again, you know, I'm not saying that you should adopt AI without some discernment. I mean, I'm not, there are certainly
mhm.
are guardrails that you should adopt. I mean, I'm presenting at Fundraising AI later next month. I encourage everyone to register for that. It's free, no reason not to. But I do think not adopting AI is like not adopting the internet in the early 2000s. Like, it's coming
Mhm.
for you. You can either accept it, it's coming, and learn how to use it responsibly, or you can get left behind. I mean, I think that's
Right.
how I feel.
And as a sector, we did sort of get left behind with the internet development and era, and it was a wave that sort of passed us by, and we spent 20 years trying to paddle up and catch up with it. And
Yeah.
this wave is rising, and it's like this time around, let's just try to get on it earlier, and not just with AI, because I think you're right, like that there can be an over focus on that. One of the things being in this sector for a long time, I've been saying to folks who are newer is like, and that you just mentioned this, that there wasn't software
Mhm.
built for us like
That's right.
there is now. And all of a sudden, I mean, every few years there would be a new piece of fundraising platform or something that came out. And now it feels like every few weeks you find out about something
Mhm.
new. And I was at a conference last month talking to one of the sales folks where they said, but also make sure you tell people, who work for nonprofits, this won't just exist forever now unless you all buy this stuff.
Right.
Like,
Right.
you now you have it. Now you've got a bunch of options for software and what you want to do. So you got to actually, invest, find the right stuff for you. And that kind of segues into, the so how do you figure out a major gift strategy for doing
Mm.
exactly that? And, can we fundraise for, hey, we need to make these in transformative investments in technology? What are
Yeah.
just some of your initial thoughts there?
Yeah. Great. So many things. So I think first and foremost, we cannot confuse strategy for the tool. And so often
Mm,
what I see is people like, okay, well, what CRM should I sign up for? And I think that's the wrong question. I think the question is like, well, what do you want to do? What are you
mhm.
trying to accomplish? And therefore, how can you find a technology solution that most clearly matches the strategy that you want to pursue? Like, there are a million roads to Rome, right?
Mhm.
And I think the mistake a lot of us make is that we try to fit our processes into the existing technology versus the other way around, which is like, how can we articulate what we want and fit in the technology to support that?
Mhm.
I think part of it is that a lot of us are not technologists or that we don't feel very comfortable with technology. And so we're just like not sure what it can do. I also think in the age of AI, there's so much that we can do. We're kind of hampered by the limits of our own imagination, right? It's
Right.
like I was on ChatGPT just before we got on, and I was like, I literally have the world's knowledge at my fingertips. Like, what could I ask, right? And prompt engineering is also a thing. So if we go too broad and we ask it some generic question without enough expertise or experience to inform what we're asking for, or even to figure out if this is a good answer or not a good answer, like that also opens a whole Pandora's box. So I forgot what I was trying to say. Oh, other than to say that I do think that there is a world in which we have to step into the breach a little bit and experiment and be comfortable with trying new things. Let's talk about major gift fundraising for a second. So I just recently read this incredible white paper. I think Amy Eisenstein was one of the authors. I'm not sure how new it is. I think it may be not incredibly new, but it blew my mind. I don't think things have changed dramatically since it was published, but it said that only 22% of nonprofits had a major gift strategy.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Why is that? Because I think that most of the time when people get major gifts or they, these gifts come through the door, it feels very random. It feels very organic. It's very like, well, this was like someone who's been in our ecosystem and like, oh, lo and behold, like it just showed up. And so
Mhm.
what I'm really pushing the sector on, and this is the hill I'm willing to die on, is that we have to have a strategy for major gifts that is a framework that is repeatable, scalable, and templated. So we can bring other people in, because what we know is like the average tenure of a development director is what, 19 months?
Wow. Is that
Yeah,
right?
it's crazy. And so
I
within
knew it was short. I did not know it was that short.
Yeah, it's really short. So what happens is people come in, everyone like has their own way of doing things, right? That may or may not work. And 18 to 19 months later, you realize that they didn't actually know what they were doing. And so I am really pushing on this strategy and framework to embed in people's fundraising departments, but also that is aligned with the way that people uh, give and interact today. So I know you had Mitch on your show recently, and I think he
Mhm.
talked a lot about DAFs. And like what we're seeing across the board is that giving is down on all different revenue lines except for major gifts. Major gifts are up. So
Nice.
we know, and I'm sure Mitch talked about this too, is like the number of DAFs are growing. We
Mhm.
know that the resources are there. The question is, how are we as a sector unlocking those resources? Let me pause there. I'm sure you have other questions, but
Yeah, and actually, one that very much came out of that conversation with Mitch last week on the show, and so he was talking about the personas of DAF donors and how they
uh-huh.
might be different from other categories of donors. And he had three, but one of them in particular that I thought was really interesting was what he called the optimizer,
Yep.
and the idea of someone who wanted to make a donation and they were sort of like assessing very
Yep.
analytically, almost like the analytical donor. What
Hmm.
is the best investment that I can make with these dollars? And so, in the sort of like broader major gift strategy, I was really curious, to ask you about kind of like how you would think about that. And one of the first things it reminded me of was when you talk about your Big Ask Gifts program, which I love the name of that, by the way.
Thank you.
um, you talk about the idea of major gifts and thinking of yourself as a philanthropic advisor.
Yep.
And I think that aligns really well with this idea of the optimizer and someone who wants to make the most strategic investment, charitable investment in impact. So how would you talk through somebody who is putting together a DAF Day campaign, how somebody should think about talking to an analytical donor in particular and kind of advising them on how they should think about their donation in that way.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'd love to speak with, actually, I will be speaking with Mitch about the optimizer, but I presume it's the person who probably is a first generation wealth creator, someone who's made their own money, who maybe has a very strong business mindset and therefore is thinking about their philanthropy in the way that they thought about their business. So these are people who are very interested in things like transparency, metrics, impact numbers. They're very data driven people. Now, that being said, I also think that it doesn't mean that you don't embed stories into that, because
Sure.
fundamentally, philanthropy is not a logical act, right? It is an emotional act that we uh, support with numbers, right? So like it's
Mm-hmm.
actually just it's an emotional decision that we're making. And so what I think that means is when we think about the brain and brain scans, we know that one part of the brain lights up when you talk about business numbers, like logical things, and a different part of the brain lights up when you talk about philanthropy. And I think the best fundraising happens when both sides of the brain are being engaged. Now,
Mm-hmm.
that being said, I do think that we're seeing the emergence, especially among DAFs, with this kind of optimizer. These folks who are very focused on transparency, accountability, KPIs, metrics, outcomes, and so forth. And so, what I would really suggest is a lot of nonprofits don't necessarily have those numbers.
Mm-hmm.
These are folks who, just to go back for a second, I would call them something like people who want money for free. What I mean by that is they want their money to have outsized impact beyond the actual dollars put in. And so what I would recommend for fundraisers out there is if you're trying to make the case of these kind of optimizers, tie the investment to a specific outcome that is 2x, 10x the initial investment.
Mm-hmm.
Because I need to feel like this makes good business sense for me to
Mm-hmm.
put the money here versus somewhere else.
And so then if you circle back to the, when we were talking about those, like that there's all this nonprofit technology now, but it takes these big investments. Part of the theory that we were starting to work on with Mitch and that we're starting to put out some content about is that when you've got more storytelling, traditional storytelling fundraising, we try to cover up the overhead. We've got the whole overhead myth and all
Yeah.
of that. But if you've got these more business analytical potential donors, they're not only, hopefully not afraid of the idea of something that might be called overhead, but it's actually appealing to them. That if you say, hey, if we were to, purchase these 3 pieces of software that we've picked, to your point, to solve these problems, like we've mapped out, here's what we're trying to solve. This is why this is the right software for us. It could be a transformative investment in the long term that they might light up at that idea. And so the idea of sort of like putting together a DAF Day campaign that's about, to fundraise for all the stuff that in our other campaigns we find hard to fundraise for, but kind of how to go about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there are lots of, let's call it preconceived notions that I think that we don't test, right? We always say like, well, people don't want to fund overhead or they're not going to fund technology or not, they're not. But I think it's all in the framing, right? It's all about, can we explain the business case? Like if we bought this technology or we bought this software and it allows us to deliver our services cheaper, faster, better, and we can translate that to like 10x or whatever it is, like that would be a good investment. I always think too about the Bain consulting pyramid. I don't know if you're familiar with
Mm-hmm.
this, but essentially at the top of the pyramid is the people want self-transcendence. Like people want to believe that the reason that they were put on this planet matters. And so self-transcendence could mean, hey, I'm going to pay for this building, or I'm going to pay for the software, or I'm going to pay for, the meals that are get put on kids' plates. Like whatever that thing is for you, my role as a philanthropic advisor is to help you do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a little bit of the mindset shift too, which is I think so many of us have been brought up with this idea of we're trying to get something, right? We're trying to extract resources from people. But really, when we're at our best, and I think anyone in sales would resonate with this, I'm just trying to find out what you want and
Mm-hmm.
if I can help you get the thing that you want. And often the thing that I want, if I'm in a philanthropist, is I want some kind of change to happen in the world. And I want to know that it's going to happen. I want to know that it's going to be efficient. I want to know that it's going to be cost effective. And more than anything, I want to know that I made a difference. I want it's almost a form of immortality to know that I can
Mm.
live beyond myself in this way. It's a
That's
legacy.
such an interesting way to think about it. And another thing I was thinking about when you were talking about that, and again, the sort of like the nonprofit fundraising conventional wisdom that we all grew up with, and what works about it and what's changing. Where one of those truisms was all that I heard 1,000 times early in my career was like, people want to give emotional, people can conceptualize of helping one person more than they can conceptualize of helping 10,000 people or 1,000,000 people, and maybe, the reality is like some people, right? Like that some people, that helps them with that transcendence idea, is like, here's one person who was helped. Now I can wrap my head around that, and I want to donate to help other people like that. But then that more business analytical person says, well, how are you going to scale that? What are and that
Yeah.
they are more excited by the argument of like, here's a path that 3 years from now we could 10x,
Yeah.
and that they do kind of grok that more, get more inspired by it.
Yeah, I have to tell you, Greg, like in my past, I've worked, so it tends, not to paint too broad a brush here, but it tends to be like finance folks and tech folks who are really focused on scale and 10xing and all of that. And that is a wonderful thing. We need kind of the big thinkers there. But I have to tell you, these are also the same people who really attach to particular stories. Like these are the people who will talk time and time again, like, oh, I remember meeting little Bobby, and so
Yeah.
I think we have to give them both. And I think we can't, um, not that we shouldn't believe them. We should certainly believe them, but I think there's a difference between what I say I'm interested in and then what I'm actually responding to behaviorally.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. I know that you've got a free webinar coming up about sort of auditing the donor journey.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that, and sort of how you take that framework of helping people envision the change that they want to see in the world at every step of a donor journey,
Yeah.
and what that, what people can expect for that webinar?
Yeah, so I love fundraising, and I didn't always love fundraising, but I love fundraising because of the magic of it. I love the connections, I love the conversations, I love telling the stories. But at the end of the day, a successful fundraising program is just math. And I think often we don't look enough at the math. We don't look at, I mean, like any structure, it's not rocket science, right? The overall strategy is like you get a bunch of people to pay attention to your stuff, you convert as many of them as you possibly can, you upgrade as many as you can, and you keep them for as long as you can. That's it. Like that works for a business, that works for a nonprofit. And so what I'm doing on this free workshop, which I think everyone should attend because it is just really good, solid information, is we're going to look at your numbers, and we're going to provide a free spreadsheet which will help you to focus on the areas that you need to focus on first in order to scale. So it could be that maybe you're just not getting enough new leads into your pipeline. It could be that not enough of them are converting into sales or donations. It could be that your retention numbers are terrible and you're losing a whole bunch of them out the back. Like, here's the other crazy thing. I was looking at stats. Retention number, you know what average retention numbers are for nonprofits?
Oh, it scare me to even guess. What is it?
2025, according to fundraising efficacy report or whatever, 18.1%.
No.
Yeah. I did not verify this. I just did this before, but 18.1%. Like, let's say that that's true. Or let's say, let's be generous. Let's say it's even 25%, right? That means that you're pouring a bunch of people into a bucket and you're losing 75% out of them at the bottom.
Wow.
So if y'all are hearing this, if the only thing you did this year was just focus on retention, you would be well ahead of the game. If the only thing you did was increase your retention to 80%, that would be a solid foundation to scale.
Yeah, I bet. And I was just checking. I hope Chris. Yeah, it looks like Chris put the link in the chat for anybody who is interested of that free upcoming webinar. Rhea, I really appreciate you joining us. I'm a huge fan of
Thank you, Greg.
all of the content that you create and the way that you think about major gifts and how it's evolving and all of that good stuff. So I was excited to be able to ask you about this particular type of donor and how to think about it and all of that good stuff, and very much appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much, Greg. It's good to see you.
Yeah, you too. And Chris has also, our amazing producer, Chris, has also put together a little video about that upcoming Proimpact ED Summit that's going to be happening in October, which again is one of these things that I always dreamed of as an executive director, to be able to have something around that time to get together with other EDs, hear about sort of what the current best practices were and inspiring case studies. We're going to have programs, case studies, marketing case studies, fundraising, operations, and then small breakout groups of EDs to be able to think about how to apply that to your organization. And so we would invite you all to check it out at proimpact.org and check out this little promo video that we've put together. And you can roll it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Strub, Content Marketing Manager for the Proimpact Project. Coming up on Thursday, October 30th, you are invited to the very first Proimpact ED Summit, a virtual event created just for nonprofit executive directors. You'll hear from our founder and former executive director himself, Greg Harrell-Edge, and sector experts on programs, fundraising, marketing, and operations. Plus, you'll get to connect with peers through breakout sessions, one-on-one networking, and our interactive expo hall. It's a day built to inspire you, challenge you, and strengthen your leadership. Register now at proimpact.org/summit. We can't wait to see you there.